First of all, I want to thank you all for taking a look at the YouTube video today. This one is basically a first in a series we're going to do. Not sure exactly what the title is going to be, but the title of this one is basically Marketing Bedtime Stories, and this video is all about money getting. And so, first of all, do me a huge favor, like and subscribe, and you can also join me on Facebook. I've got about 4,200 followers, friends over there. And you can also join my private Facebook group. We've got 17,000 members in our group. And all you got to do is, there might be a link here, but if you go and find me on Facebook, Manny Talavera, you can also on my page, on my personal page, right at the top there, you can join my group as well. And so I've studied marketing over 15,000 hours. I started out studying Jay Abraham, spent about 5,000 hours, 6,000 hours studying Jay, and then I went on to Dan Kennedy, Frank Kern, and later on all the rest. And so I've got quite a bit of knowledge as far as marketing, and we're just going to give you a lot of insights in this video and in all the videos to come. And so, like I said, I really, really appreciate you all watching. And so, again, what we're going to talk about today is it's all about money getting. And so money comes from selling something. It doesn't come from creating. And that's where everyone gets kind of freaked out. That's where everyone gets complete. They don't understand the process. They don't understand how any of this works. Money doesn't come from creating. Money comes from selling. Creating and delivering something, there's a cost to that. But selling, that's where the money comes in. There's no cost in selling. When you're selling something, you're actually bringing money in. And so, I've got a group with 17,000 members in it. And, a lot of people will say, I'm going to, in order to make X amount of dollars, I've created a course or I've created a coaching program. And that makes sense. That's the actual vehicle you're going to use. But like I said, the problem is, that's not what the money comes from. The money doesn't come from the vehicle. The money comes from the audience. And that's the rub. That's where everyone makes mistakes. That's where the breakdown happens. You can be the best in the world at anything, but it doesn't really matter if you don't have a following, an audience. If you look at our marketplace, the biggest people in our marketplace, Anthony Robbins, Taya Lopez, Grant Cardone, they have the biggest following. They have influence. Influence is all about being able to move a market, being able to get people to do something. That's what it's all about. So, and in order to have influence, you have to have a huge amount of eyeballs. And so I think there's a book out there called 1,000 Buyers. If you have 1,000 buyers, you can make as much money as you'll ever want. You can make millions and millions of dollars a year. And Dan Kennedy says that once you have 1,000 buyers, you will not be able to create enough content to satisfy those people. If you created content 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they will still want more. They're going to be ravenous. And like I said, you'll always be able to make money. And so the money doesn't come from the thing or the things. The money comes from the audience. And so, if you look at the book industry is very, very interesting. Right now, how the book industry works is it's all about how many people are on your Instagram and how many people are on your Twitter. The people who have the biggest followings on Instagram and Twitter, that's where all of the money is going in the book deals. And so when you see people getting a $5 million book deal or $7 million book deal or whatever that number is, it's all based on followers. It's all because they know what it is these people have figured it out. There's an algorithm. There are people who probably have master's degrees or MBAs, and they know essentially based on the amount of followers this person has, how many books that are likely to be sold. And that's where the money comes from. And so they pretty much probably got an algorithm, and they got a formula set up for that. And so when you're thinking about, if you look at the book, 1,000 True Buyers, like I said, Dan Kennedy said, if you have 1,000 true buyers, you can do anything you want. It's not 1,000 followers. It's not 1,000 people on your email list. It's 1,000 buyers. It's a completely different thing. Um, so in order to get the 1,000 buyers, you might need 20,000 on your list, 30,000 on your list. You might need 200,000 on your list, but it doesn't matter, because if you got 1,000 true fans, 1,000 people that will buy anything that you put in front of them, you can what we call make money at will. You can print money on demand. And at the top of the food chain, that's what these people are able to do. And so Dan Kennedy created a product, I don't know, probably 10 years ago. I went through over 300 of his courses. It was called Moving Up the Money Pyramid. And what's interesting, Dan Kennedy said, the top of the money pyramid is fame. And what is fame? Fame is influence. Fame is millions of people following you, and money follows fame. He said at the top of, if you look at what you do, what's interesting is everyone has this idea that the better you get at something, the more money you're going to make, and that's not the truth at all. The best people in every industry do not make the most money. It's the person who's famous in that industry that makes the most money. That's where the money comes from, the fame. And so, when you're trying to build something, what you really should be building is the audience of people to buy it. Because if you build the audience first, you can sell them anything, and you can keep putting offers in front of them until you find something that clicks. The other thing that you can do is you can simply ask them what they want and then create it and sell it to them. And so the money comes, like I said, from the audience of buyers. And like I said, this is where people get confused, and this is where people kind of go off the rails, and they don't understand how all of this stuff works. And so, like I said, so money essentially follows fame. You become famous. You become as famous in a niche. You're always going to be able to figure out a way to make money from that. And like I said, what's interesting is if you look at what Tai Lopez is doing, and he's doing really, really, really well. Most of what he's selling, he doesn't even create. He's basically finding people out there who are experts in all of these different industries, and then he basically plugs what they've done into his audience, and he makes most of the money. The money comes from the influence. The money comes from the marketing, not the thing. That's what people don't get that. That's where the money comes from. And so he probably gets these people and he pays them very, very little, or a very small percentage of the money that's coming in. He probably doesn't pay them a percentage, but as far as the money they're making, it's a very small percentage of what comes in. It's probably a flat fee, but very, very little, because he has something that they don't have, and that's an audience. And so what happens in our space is you have all these people who say, well, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to be an internet marketer, or I'm going to sell online. And the answer is, you should be getting 2 jobs, and you should have 1 job to pay your bills and 1 job to drive traffic and build an audience, because you need money. You need money you need runway. You need money to build this thing. And Grant Cardone talks a lot about the amount of money he invested into building the audience, and he constantly was doing that. Tai Lopez said something that was very interesting. And I think that you could really learn a lot from it. He basically said, I'm not going to take any money off the table until I have 10,000 people following me, 10 million people following me. And so what he basically said is he was going to roll every penny he got back into that business until he had 10 million followers. And now he's at the top of the food chain. And it's because he had that mentality. The problem with our space is people, they either have no runway at all, and runway is the amount of money it takes to get something off the ground, to get something to take off, or they start taking money off the table and waste it on lifestyle, and that's a huge mistake. And so what you want to think about what you're doing in terms of not what you're going to put in front of these people to sell them, but who you're going to be selling to and how you're going to build that off audience and nurture it. And you can build it on Facebook, you can build it on YouTube, you can build it on Instagram, but you definitely must build a list, because at any given time, you have traffic that you control and then traffic that you don't control, and you don't control the traffic on Facebook. Facebook controls the traffic on Facebook, and that's what you want to think about. But if you have an email list, you control that audience on that email list. You control what you send to those people. And so I'm over here on YouTube, and what I'm wanting to do is build a very, very huge YouTube following. And so, like I said, do me a huge favor, like this channel, like this video, subscribe, and also join me on Facebook. But we're building over here because we've got 17,000 in a group on Facebook, and it's very, very hard to get even 500 people to see what we do over there, because Facebook has just did a U-turn on groups, and they turn the traffic off. And so there's always going to be a price to pay to build that audience, but the money comes from the audience. And so if you look at the biggest people on Instagram with the biggest followers, those people can literally print money on demand, because they can move an audience to do something. They can suggest something, and they can move a market. And so you see these people getting paid, $10,000, $50,000, $100,000 for shout outs, because those shout outs are valuable, because it takes this group's audience and then puts the spotlight on the thing they're shouting out. And so that's where the money comes from. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a story. Sam Ovens, I followed Sam from the very, very, very beginning, and most people don't realize this. Sam had a completely different product in a wide variety of niches. He was doing a number of things, and he had ultimately made about $120,000 selling several different types of consulting. I think he was doing SEO. He was doing maybe Google AdWords. He was building websites and some other things, but he wasn't doing a lot of it. He had a team of people doing it all, but they were selling that as a service, and he was making money. And after he made the 100,000, I think it was 120,000, he created a course called How I Made 120,000 in Consulting. And then the next year he updated it and said How I Made 240,000 in Consulting. And Sam actually came from Dane Maxwell. He came from the foundation. He had taken the foundation as a course, and then he couldn't figure out how to get the foundation to work. And so he kind of created his own thing, and he was doing it. And then what happened is, by chance, he ran into Tai Lopez in a gym, and they were working out and they were having a conversation. And Tai Lopez decided to shout out Sam Ovens. And that's how Sam became Sam Ovens. He basically said he went from making a few $100,000 to making well over $1 million very, very, very fast. He said the money came in and the business blew up so fast, it almost imploded him. That's how big he became. And that's because Tai Lopez had this 10 million followers. And so, like I said, what you want to think about is not the channel or not the vehicle that you're going to make the money from, but building that group of people who could give you the money. And what's interesting is the way money moves now and the way money works is just very, very different than it used to be. I'm going to tell you this story. The story's about 8 years old. I think I originally told this story. I told it at a Toastmasters about 6 or 7 years ago. So there was a school bus monitor. She had a bit of a weight problem. Now, we didn't have school bus monitors when I was a kid, but I guess a school bus monitor is an adult person that sits on the bus, and he keeps the kids from killing each other while they're on the bus. And that person's job is to monitor the behavior of the kids. Well, these kids started making fun of the bus monitor, and they started calling her fat. Now, maybe they were making fun, maybe it was constructive criticism, call it what you will. What I don't know, what's interesting is when I told this story originally, it didn't even dawn on me that, let me get this straight. They were calling her fat and she started crying. She's the bus monitor. Why didn't she grab one of them by the hair and just throw them off the bus while it was driving? I mean, it's her job is to monitor the kids on the bus, and they start calling her fat, and she starts crying instead of monitoring their behavior, which makes no sense to me. But anyway, there's two kids doing this. A third kid pulls a phone out and starts videotaping it. And he immediately shares it to YouTube. So, two kids making fun of her. She starts crying. Some kid takes video, sends it to YouTube. The next day, another person sees it, another kid sees it, and says, "Oh, poor bus driver monitor. Maybe I will start a GoFundMe to send her on vacation." Starts a GoFundMe for the bus monitor, and the bus monitor ends up with $680,000 because a couple of kids were calling her fat. Now, I'm no threat to the dietary drink. I think about lunch when I'm eating breakfast. If y'all want to hurl some insults at me and someone wants to throw it up on YouTube, I'll share the revenue from it. We will all do well. But the point of this is that money is made differently now. Money's all made by attention. 20 years ago, that never would have happened. What's interesting about that story, though, 20 years ago, that never would have happened. It wasn't possible. If it happened this year, she'd have probably made $5 million, because now you see people making $1 million or $2 million from a GoFundMe because something like this happens. It's all based on eyeballs. It's all based on attention. And so your job is to build an audience and create attention for yourself and focus on that number and always be building that number. And so my goal is just to start going live every single day and see how long I can do it, and just do it until I drop dead or I make $50 million, right? That's the goal here. The problem is I have a lot of health issues, and so I don't know if we'll be able to string 500 of these together or not. We're going to see what happens, though. And so if you look at what happened here, school bus monitor, the kids were definitely not doing the right thing. Again, the kids were definitely being mean, but at the same time, her job is to monitor the behavior, and she really wasn't doing a very good job. Now, I can tell you though that after she got her $680,000, she did retire from being a bus monitor. So at least she's not in that profession anymore, because it sounds like it probably wasn't the best profession for her. But again, what you want to think about is, what can you do to go viral? What can you do to get a lot of eyeballs on what you're doing? Because that's where the money comes from. You build a huge audience of people, you can sell them anything. You can keep making offers until they buy something. You can say, "What do you want?" and you can create it and sell it to them. There's a lot that you can do once you have the audience. And so I'm going to talk about another one here, Danielle Bregoli. A lot of you probably don't know who Danielle Bregoli is. I think she's around 19 years old now. She made $48 million last year from OnlyFans. $48 million. She got famous on the Dr. Phil show when she was 16. She was the Cash Me Outside girl. She became insta famous from Dr. Phil. She got a record deal. And last year, she made $48 million on OnlyFans. Audience and opportunity. Now what's interesting, again, and I'm not saying she's not talented. She did get a record deal. She was on some rap videos, and she became big. And fortunately for her, and I think this is something that you also want to make a note of, she clearly had some very, very, very smart people in her corner. Okay, because my understanding of this is she was on Dr. Phil when she was 16. She cannot be on OnlyFans until she's 18. But literally, in a week of her turning 18, there was an OnlyFans account, and she made that year $48 million. So from 18 to 19, 48 million. And so the fortunate thing is she has good management behind her, and there's some people who are really smart who understand how all of this works, and she had some help there. She has a team, and that also makes a lot of sense. And so when you're thinking about this stuff, what you want to think about is, really, when you think about it, I always tell people, most people way overestimate how much money they can make in the short term. Way overestimate how much they can make in the short term. Way underestimate how much they can make in the long term. So rather than saying I want to make $1 million in a year, you need to say I'm going to make 150,000 in a year. And instead of saying you're going to make $3 million, say you're going to make 50 million, 50 million long term. But so take that short-term goal, take the short-term goal, make it a little bit smaller, take that long-term goal and make it much, much bigger. And then always be focused on the people, the audience, how big that number is getting and what that's looking like. And like I said, Ty Lopez, 10 million followers. He said he wasn't going to take a penny off the table. Now I want to talk about that because I want you to think about something. The money comes from being able to scale something. It comes from runway, and most people don't have any. They don't have the runway to get something off the ground. And so you need the runway to get something off the ground, and then you need the discipline to keep rolling the money over until you blow something up, until it gets really, really big. Like, it's interesting, Sam Ovens, I'm a huge fan of Sam. But Sam, I think Sam comes from Talking More. Talking More, he's on the cusp. He's a little bit autistic. He's got, he's on the spectrum, but he's brilliant, right? And these guys did some things that are really, really, really smart. And what's interesting about Sam Ovens is he never quit. He just never quit. I mean, and what I mean by that is, first of all, these guys are very, very rigid. So if you go out there and you look for Sam Ovens' video on his time minute, on a day in the life, that what he did on the schedule, it's like, I'll try and go over. I'm going to blow it up. I'm going to do it wrong, but I'm going to just basically tell you what it looks like. He gets up at 7 to 7:20. He does meditation or something. 7:20 to 7:50, he takes a shower. 7:50 to 8:10, he eats breakfast. 8:30, he's at his desk. From 8:30 to noon, 8:30 to 10:30 or 11, he works. He takes a break for 10 minutes. He comes back. From 11:10 to noon, 12:30, he works. From 12:30 to 1:15, he eats lunch. From 1:30 to 4, he works. From 4 to 4:15, he takes a break. And he works till like 8 at night. And he's a bazillionaire. And he hasn't changed any of this. He's still doing the same schedule. And he does it 6 days a week. 6 days a week. Not 4 and not 5. 6 days a week. And he works from like 8:30 a.m. Basically from 7 to 9, 6 days a week. And then Sunday he takes the day off. And very regimented. And the other thing is time. So, smart people they construct time systems where they're not wasting any time at all. When Sam was in New York City, he had he lived in like the 15th floor of a penthouse. My understanding is after he blew up, he was going to a gym very, very, very close to his house, and eventually I think there was a gym on the same, like four floors down later on. And so everything was very, very time concentric. So when he moved to California, he basically told his house manager, find me a gym close to home. Guy found him a gym, said, hey, it's 15 minutes away. And Sam said, wait a minute, it's 15 minutes away, so it's going to be 12 minutes. It's going to take me 3 minutes to get in, Then I got to key in. Then I got to do the gym. Then I got to shower and change clothes. Then it's going to be 15 minutes going home. And sometimes when I have traffic, so it's going to be more. And then what he did is he said, so that's going to be 45 minutes a day times 7 days. And he did the time and he figured out how much time it's going to take. And he said, no, I ain't doing that. He said, how much is it going to cost to build a gym in my garage? And the guy said, 7,500. And he said, build it. So it's all about time. So Sam he doesn't go out to eat. He doesn't, everything's brought in. He was sick. The doctor came to him, right? All about, we're going to work from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. This is my schedule. It's uninterrupted. This is what I'm going to do. And anything that deviates from that is going to be very, very minimal on his part. So he's sick. He doesn't want to go to the doctor. The doctor, he basically pays to break the doctor to come in. He doesn't go get a haircut. He has them come to his house to cut his hair. And he said that when he would go eat, he did not want to go to a restaurant to eat. And so he said what he would do is they would go to a restaurant, and he said it's kind of ridiculous because he basically say, when the waitress came over to give the drinks, he'd say, we want you to take our drink order and we want you to take our food order, and here's the money for it, and we want to do everything now, so when we're done we can just get up and leave. He doesn't waste any time on anything, and it's a mindset. And so like I said, you got to construct these systems, and you got to focus, because all of it comes from getting as many eyeballs as you can on your thing, and then constantly basically working on that offer and putting that offer in front of people, and then doing that same system over and over and over, and not deviating from it. And Sam is really, really big about these flywheels and things like that. And so, like I said, I'm very impressed with the way he navigates through all of this stuff. And so now what you're seeing, it's very, very interesting. First of all, like I said, the people who are the best at anything are never the ones who make the most money. It's the people who are famous for it. I mean, think about it. Like say, Dr. Phil had a best-selling weight loss book. I mean, that dude's huge. I mean, if that guy turns sideways, that thing all goes out the window. And he's selling a diet book, and it's a national bestseller. And it's only because he has an audience. He's not even thin. He's not even thin by any stretch of the imagination. And so what you want to think, that's what you want to think about. So what's interesting is Dr. Phil, Oprah, and those people, they can put their name on anything that they want and blow it up. It doesn't matter what it is. And it's like I said, once you build that audience, you can figure out what they want. You can create it. You can find other people to create it. Creating the thing isn't even where the money is. It's not. Like I said, if you look at Tai Lopez, I think that probably 2/3 of the offers he makes to his list are not anything that he even created. He basically is going out and grabbing things that other people created, and he's selling them to his list. And so now what you're seeing is the money is in content. The money is in building a following. And what you see now is there are a metric ton of people who are doing really, really, really well on YouTube. So, so I can tell you, 15,000 hours, marketing, strategy, mindset, copywriting, Facebook groups. Now I'm studying YouTube. I've spent a lot of time there, and I'm studying, Mr. Beast, Daryl Eves or Ives, all of the biggest names in YouTube and what they're doing to go viral. And so I'm spending a lot of time here, and there's a lot of people who are building these very, very large YouTube channels, and their only claim to fame is they were in jail or they were in prison. And what's interesting is some of them were not famous before they went to prison, and they went to prison, and then they got out of prison, and now they built a huge YouTube following, in most cases making way, way, way more money doing the YouTube thing, than they were doing that was illegal that they went to jail for before. So the guy that was a counterfeiter, he certainly is making way, way, way more money now than he ever made counterfeiting. Um, and then there's the guy who's a drug user. There are a number of drug dealers who are doing it, who went to prison. But there's a lot of people who are drug users. And what's interesting is these guys never had any money, and now they've got all kinds of it, and they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. And what's interesting is they're still using. They still are doing the same stuff that they were doing, and people still buy their stuff. People still. So these guys, and what's interesting, these guys all have merchandise. These people all have, and by the way, I didn't get the merchandise. I thought it was the biggest waste of time in the world. And until I watched a Logan Paul video, and he said the biggest mistake he made was turning down the merchandise or not doing the merchandise sooner. He said it was like, millions and millions of freaking dollars that he left on the table because he didn't do it earlier. And Mr. B said something very, very similar to that. Very similar to the same thing, how the merchandise turned everything around. But these guys are selling merchandise. They have Patreon channels, and then they do these package deals, package offers, and they just create whatever it is they want to create, and then they sell it, and people buy. And what's interesting is people know there's in some cases supporting a drug habit, and they still buy. And what's interesting is they're on drugs because you can kind of tell by, if you know people on drugs, you can kind of tell by watching some of the videos, the person's not doing well. And then the other thing about it, not only that, is that they go on hiatus. They're gone for 30 or 60 or 90 days. Well, they're visiting home. They've been gone for a while. And then they come back and they go right back to what they did. But what's interesting, 50,000, 100,000 followers, and they're doing really, really, really well. And so what's interesting now is the market, like the way the market is now. So Billy McFarland just got out of prison about 120 days ago, 4 months, maybe 5 months ago. Billy McFarland's the Fire Festival guy, right? He's going to do very, very, very well. I can tell you that 20 years ago, I would not have bet on this guy to make any kind of a real comeback. But because of YouTube, this guy's going to do extremely well. Now, he's got this huge amount of restitution that he will never pay back in a million years, but he's still gonna live a very, very, very comfortable life, and he's still gonna probably make millions of dollars. As a matter of fact, he's on probation, so he can't leave the state, but he's already got a team. They're already working on these tours to Bahamas and all of these different places, which is what he was doing before the Fire Festival. And they're probably going to be way bigger than he ever was, except for the Fire Festival. But they're going to do very, very, very well. And like I said before, I wouldn't have bet on this guy. But now, even with the limitations he's going to have on him because of the felony and all of that, he's going to do very, very well. But he's already got the Instagram, the YouTube. He's already building a channel. And like I said, I don't know where he's at, but the guy will end up with probably 500,000 followers and be able to, create money at will, which is very, very interesting. So Elizabeth Holmes, Theranos, now this is the thing. She's also got a very, very large amount of restitution, probably going to have a large amount of restitution. And she's also dating someone who's ultra, ultra wealthy. The guy owns, his family owns a chain of hotels, like a lot of them, not like 10, but maybe 100 or more. I mean, very, very large organization. But she will do well. And like I said, she's never going to probably get around the restitution, but she will come out and she will, she's fortunate because she's famous going in. And so when she comes out, she will do really well. And she's never going to run out of stories because she's got 8 years, right? So what's interesting is one of these guys, he's been arrested like 15 times. And so it's like, the seventh time I went to jail, video 6. The seventh time I went to jail, 14. The seventh time I went to jail, 16. And he's been arrested 15 times, and he's still getting arrested. So he's never going to run out of content. And then the other thing is, when you only go to jail once or twice, everything that you, the story, everything you were doing before you got arrested. Then you got the arrest story that's going to be 300 videos that you can, and the thing is, a lot of it's all embellished. I can tell you, you watch these stories, you know they're embellishing, you know they're making it much different than it really is, because otherwise they would tell the story in 15 minutes. You can't have a 15 part series on getting arrested unless you embellish a little bit. And then you got the jail prior to bail, then you got the bail, and then you got the trial, if you have a trial, and then you got the prison. And like I said, and this guy, one of these guys, has been arrested 15 times, so he's never going to ever run out of content, and he keeps getting arrested, so he gets to keep creating more. And so now what's interesting is, if people can, what you need to think about is you need to study markets and behaviors and what's causing people to watch these people and buy their merchandise and give them. It's all based on story. It's all based on creating an interesting story and being able to hold people's attention and getting eyeballs on what you're doing. And if you can do that, you're going to do very, very, very well. And I would suggest you do it without going to prison or jail. That's just me. You know, I would much rather do it the hard way than the easy way, if that's the easier way, if you want to look at it that way. But I can tell you, these guys are doing very, very, very well. And so what's interesting, like I said, a lot of these people who would have went to prison and came out and might have struggled, most of them are going to do very, very well, especially if they were, what's interesting is if they were a little bit high profile before going in, they'll be extremely high profile when they get out. So, if Alex Murdaugh didn't get up, it didn't end up in jail for 200 years, I probably wouldn't have bet against him. I mean, he's never going to make the millions that he was making, but he would have probably been able to do okay because he had followers. And so, like I said, there's always going to be, well, I think one of the interesting things about this is there's the second chance, the redemption, the story of struggle, and how someone's going to turn their life around, and people really want to support that. Especially, if what's interesting is people who have drug pasts really, really want to believe that someone's going to change and buy into that. And so I think that helps. I think that makes a big difference. And so I think that's interesting. Another thing that you really want to follow and study, and I followed this and studied it quite extensively, is that white collar criminals who are making hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars and they go to prison, they don't generally get out of prison and go to a halfway house and work at a McDonald's and then get a job at Walmart. It just doesn't work that way. Now, the halfway house part might be right, but generally they come back, and what it is people recreate their comfort zones. And so if you're a person, and I really believe in the money thermometer thing. And I think the first time I learned about the money thermometer was Harbecker, one of the earliest courses I watched and listened to. But, people have a money thermometer, and that's their gauge, and they don't drop below that. If they get anything close to below that, they get nervous and they bulk it back up. And so people recreate their comfort zones. And so a lot of these guys, they always figure it out. I've studied the rags to riches a lot. And what I have found is that the people that you see who make a lot of money in our space, they came from making a lot of money doing something else before, or they had some influences, and there's so many of them. And so, like, what I always say is success leaves clues. And so you see these people come out of prison, and they might, like I said, they might hit the halfway house, but usually they immediately they recreate that lifestyle that they had pretty quick. I mean, it's almost fluid how quickly they go back to that. And so if you look at our marketplace, the people who struggle to make it, to blow it up, and they do ultimately become really, really, really successful. You want to really look at their backstories. I studied their backstories. As a matter of fact, I spent a lot of time there. I studied marketing about 10 or 15,000 hours, and then I went back and I studied everything that they did that got them to where they were. So Frank Kern, Jay Abraham, Dan Kennedy, Eben Pagan, Dean Jackson. I studied all their stories from when they were like 18, before they had a dime, before they were doing any, before they ever created or sold anything, because I wanted to understand the pattern. And it's very, very interesting. And so success leaves clues. When you look at these people, look at where they come from, because there's usually some DNA there. There's some DNA there, that's probably caused them to be successful here. So either they were successful somewhere else and then they came and they were successful here, or they had influences and they were surrounded by that, and that was their driving force, and they understood what the other side looks like. And I studied, like, I had this innate curiosity about going from one side to the other, about going from poverty to millions of dollars, what that transition looks like, what it means to go from being a have not to being a have, what it means to go from living day to day, week to week, month to month, or whatever that is to some people, to never ever being like having enough money to live the rest of your life comfortably if nothing ever came in again. You know what I mean? And so, like I said, I study that stuff. So I'm going to end out. I really, really appreciate each and every one of you watching this. Do me a huge favor, like the video, give me a comment. I will respond to all of the comments. Do me a big favor. Join me on Facebook. Follow me on Facebook. Send me a friend request. Join my private Facebook group with 17,000 people in it. Maybe you can help me blow that group up and wake it up again. But I appreciate you all being here, and we will be back tomorrow, and thanks a lot.